The morning sun peeked through the dusty blinds of Jasmine's bedroom as she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the dates circled in red on her calendar. Today was the day. Her father, Robert, was getting married again, and she wasn't invited. Jasmine ran her fingers over the simple black dress laid out beside her. It wasn't fancy like what the other guests would wear, but it wasn't meant to be. She wasn't going as a celebration, she was going for her mom. 3 years had passed since her dad walked out. 3 birthdays, 3 Christmases, 3 Father's Days with no call, no card, nothing but the occasional weekend visit with her little brother Dian. At 16, Jasmine was old enough to choose, and she chose to stay away. Why bother with someone who didn't bother with you? She still remembered the night it happened. The shouting, the crying, her mom begging him to stay, to think about the kids. But Robert had made up his mind. Vanessa was waiting for him, and by morning, his closet was empty, and so was his side of the bathroom counter. You going somewhere? Jasmine's mom appeared in the doorway, dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't been sleeping well again. Just meeting up with Tasha, Jasmine lied. Her mom didn't need to know where she was really going. It would only upset her more. Okay, baby, be back before dark. Her mom's voice was tired, worn down like an old shoe. She hadn't been the same since the divorce. Some days she barely got out of bed. Other days she'd clean the house top to bottom like she was trying to scrub away memories. After her mom left, Jasmine quickly got dressed. She had overheard her Aunt Yvette on the phone last week complaining about having to attend Robert's mistake of a wedding at the fancy church downtown. It wasn't much to go on, but Jasmine was smart. A few social media searches later, and she found a cousin of Vanessa posting about helping decorate First Baptist on Central Avenue for the big day. The bus ride downtown felt longer than usual. Each stop brought a new knot to Jasmine's stomach. Was she really doing this? Was it worth it? But then she'd remember her mom crying in the kitchen at midnight, or the time Dian waited by the window all Saturday because Dad promised to come but never showed. First Baptist was bigger than Jasmine expected. White columns stretched toward the sky, and a crowd of well-dressed people milled around outside. Jasmine hung back watching. She spotted her dad's brother and his wife, some cousins she hadn't seen in years, and faces she didn't recognize, probably Vanessa's family. Jasmine slipped in through a side door as people began moving inside. The church smelled like flowers and perfume. Rows of white ribbons decorated the pews, and soft music played from hidden speakers. She found a spot in the back corner, partially hidden by a large flower arrangement. No one noticed her. No one was looking for her. As the music changed and guests settled into their seats, Jasmine's hands began to shake. What would happen when her dad saw her? Would he be angry? Would he have her thrown out? Then the wedding party started coming down the aisle. Groomsmen in black suits, bridesmaids in pale blue dresses, and finally her dad, looking nervous but happy in a way Jasmine hadn't seen in years. Something cold settled in her chest. This man, smiling, fixing his tie, whispering to his best man, was a stranger who happened to look like her father. The dad who taught her to ride a bike, who checked for monsters under her bed, who called her his little star, seemed to have vanished into thin air. As the music swelled and people stood for the bride's entrance, Jasmine took a deep breath. In her pocket was her phone with all the evidence she needed. The bride wouldn't be the only one making an entrance today. Jasmine hadn't come to celebrate. She'd come to tell the truth, even if her voice shook with every word. Robert stood at the altar, tugging at his collar as if it was suddenly too tight. The church was packed with people, faces from his old life mixing awkwardly with his new one. His brother had warned him it would feel strange, but he wasn't prepared for just how right that would be. His eyes scanned the crowd out of habit, looking for his children. Dian had been invited, of course. At 10 years old, the boy didn't fully understand the mess the adults had made of everything. But Vanessa had put her foot down about Jasmine. She hates me, Robert. She'll ruin everything, she had said. And maybe she was right. The last time he saw Jasmine was at Dian's birthday 7 months ago. He had shown up with presents and a cake, hoping to smooth things over. But Jasmine had stayed in her room the entire time, coming out only when he was leaving. The look she gave him, like he was a stranger who had wandered into their house, still haunted him. "You good man," his best friend Keith whispered, noticing Robert's distraction. Yeah, just thinking about the kids, Robert admitted. Diane's with your mom today, right? Robert nodded. His son had been invited, but at the last minute, the boy had called saying he didn't feel well. Robert suspected his ex-wife had something to do with it, but he didn't push. Some battles weren't worth fighting. The wedding planner signaled that they were ready to begin. As the music changed and guests settled into their seats, Robert tried to focus on the moment. This was supposed to be a happy day, a fresh start. But as he looked out at the sea of faces, something caught his eye. There, in the back corner, partially hidden by flowers, was a familiar face. Jasmine. His heart dropped to his stomach. She wasn't supposed to be here. No one had told her about the wedding. He had made sure of that. But there she was, watching him with those serious eyes that looked so much like her mother's. Keith followed his gaze. Is that? Yeah, Robert whispered. That's my daughter. Want me to get someone to? No, Robert cut him off. Let her stay. The music swelled as the bridesmaids began their procession. Robert tried to smile, to play his part, but his mind was racing. Why was Jasmine here? Was she planning something? The last time they really talked, she had called him a liar and a cheat, said he abandoned them, said he chose Vanessa over his own family. The worst part was she wasn't entirely wrong. After he left, things fell apart quickly. His ex-wife took it hard, sinking into a depression that the kids had to navigate around. Diane still came for visits, quiet and withdrawn, bringing homework and video games to fill the awkward silences. But Jasmine refused all contact. Her absence felt like a judgment, one that Robert couldn't argue with, not really. Vanessa didn't understand. They'll adjust, she would say. Kids are resilient. But they weren't just any kids, they were his kids, and he had failed them. As the music changed to announce the bride, Robert caught Jasmine shifting in her seat. She looked older somehow, more serious than a 16-year-old should. The baby girl who used to ride on his shoulders, who would bring him dandelions and call them flowers, was gone. In her place was this young woman with hard eyes and secrets. The doors at the back of the church opened. Everyone stood. Vanessa appeared in a cloud of white, beautiful and beaming. This was the woman he had given up everything for. The woman who made him feel alive again when his marriage had become nothing but arguments and silence. Looking at her still made his heart race, even after 3 years together. But as he watched his bride walk toward him, Robert couldn't help glancing back at his daughter. Jasmine was standing too, but her hand was in her pocket, clutching something. Her face was set with determination. It was the same expression she wore when she was 7 and decided to learn to ride a bike without training wheels, scraped knees be damned. That's when Robert knew. Jasmine hadn't come to make peace. She had come to make a scene. Vanessa floated down the aisle like she was walking on clouds instead of the red carpet runner. Her white dress sparkled under the church lights, and her smile was so wide it looked like it might break her face. The guests watched her with that soft look people get at weddings, like they're seeing something magical. Jasmine watched too, but there was nothing soft about the way she looked at her dad's bride-to-be. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The words she had practiced all week were stuck somewhere between her chest and her mouth. The minister began to speak, his voice deep and serious. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Jasmine barely heard him. She was watching her dad's face, trying to find the man who used to tuck her in at night. Who was this stranger in a fancy suit, holding hands with the woman who broke up their family? If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot be lawfully joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The traditional words hung in the air. This was it, the moment Jasmine had come for. Her legs felt like jelly as she stood up. Her voice came out higher than she meant it to. I object. The word echoed through the church like a stone dropped in still water. Heads turned, mouths opened, a few people gasped. Vanessa froze mid-smile, her bouquet clutched tight enough to crush the stems. Jasmine. Her dad's voice cracked on her name. He looked like someone had slapped him. The minister blinked rapidly, clearly not used to people actually objecting at weddings. Young lady, this is highly. My father can't marry her, Jasmine said, cutting him off. Her voice was shaking, but she kept going. She stepped into the aisle, suddenly aware of how many eyes were on her. The fancy dresses and suits made her simple black dress seem even plainer, but she wasn't here to look pretty. Not when she's been threatening my mother. A ripple of whispers spread through the guests. Someone near the front said, "Oh my God, just loud enough for everyone to hear." Her dad laughed nervously. "Honey, I don't know what you're talking about. This isn't the time or place for." "When is the time, Dad?" Jasmine took another step forward. "When Mom gets hurt. When it's too late." Vanessa's brother stood up. "Someone get this kid out of here," he growled, looking around for support. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone from her pocket, her fingers slippery with sweat as she unlocked it. "I have proof." The church went quiet, that heavy kind of quiet that feels like it might crush you. "Jasmine." Her dad stepped down from the altar, moving toward her slowly like she was a scared animal that might bolt. "Whatever you think is happening, we can talk about it. Just not here, not now." "You never want to talk." Tears burned at the back of Jasmine's eyes, but she blinked them away. Crying would make her look like a child having a tantrum. You left and you never looked back. You don't know what's been happening. You don't know what she's been doing. Vanessa finally found her voice. "Robert, make her leave. She's ruining everything." "See?" Jasmine turned to the crowd. "That's all she cares about. Her perfect day. Her perfect wedding. She doesn't care who gets hurt along the way." Some of the guests were standing now, unsure whether to leave or stay for the drama. Jasmine's aunt was there, looking horrified but not surprised. A few rows back, her dad's coworker was recording everything on his phone. "You don't know what you're talking about," Vanessa hissed, her perfect bride mask slipping. "You're just a spoiled brat who can't stand seeing her daddy happy." That stung, but Jasmine held her ground. "I know exactly what I'm talking about." She held up her phone, turning to face the crowd. "For the last 6 months, my mom has been getting messages. Threats. Someone telling her to disappear, to stay away from my dad forever, or else." Jasmine looked directly at Vanessa, whose face had gone from angry red to ghostly white. "And I know who sent them." The church felt like it was holding its breath. Jasmine's hands trembled slightly as she opened the gallery on her phone, but her voice stayed steady. "It started with little things," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Messages from fake accounts. We thought it was just internet trolls at first." She walked closer to her father, close enough to see the confusion in his eyes. Was it real, or was he just a good actor? She couldn't tell anymore. Then they got worse. Jasmine turned her phone so her dad could see the screen. "Someone's been watching Mom. Following her. They know when she goes to work, when she comes home." Robert's face went pale as he read the message on the screen. "Saw you at the grocery store today. Blue sweater suits you. Shame if something happened to ruin it." "There's more," Jasmine said, scrolling through her phone. "Dozens more." Aunt Yvette stood up from her seat, moving toward Jasmine. "Baby, what are you talking about? Why didn't you tell anyone?" Mom didn't want to worry anyone. She thought it would stop. Jasmine's voice cracked a little, but it got worse. She showed another message. "After tomorrow, he'll be mine forever, and you won't be a problem anymore." "That came yesterday," Jasmine said, "right before someone broke into our house." A gasp rippled through the church. Her dad's face changed from confused to concerned. "What? Your house was broken into? Is your mother okay? Is Dion okay?" The questions tumbled out of him. "We're fine," Jasmine said. "Nothing was stolen. But Mom's bedroom was a mess, like someone was looking for something." "And you think?" Robert glanced at Vanessa, who was still standing at the altar, her white dress suddenly looking too bright under the church lights. "I know," Jasmine corrected him. "The messages always come when you and Vanessa are fighting. When you canceled dinner at her place last month to help Mom with Dion's science project. That night, Mom got 3 threatening messages." Vanessa finally spoke, her voice high and tight. "This is ridiculous. I would never." 2 weeks ago, Jasmine continued, ignoring her, "you told Vanessa you might skip the honeymoon to attend Dion's basketball tournament. That night, someone left a dead bird on our porch with a note saying choose wisely." The minister looked horrified. Some guests were already slipping out the side doors, not wanting to be part of whatever was happening. "That doesn't prove anything," Vanessa said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "No, but this might." Jasmine pulled up a photo. This is a screenshot of the messages. See that little icon in the corner? That's a tracking app. Whoever sent these wanted to know when Mom read them. The same app was downloaded on our home computer last night, after the break-in. Robert was shaking his head slowly. Jasmine, this is a serious accusation. You can't just... I'm not making this up. Jasmine felt tears threatening again. Why wouldn't he believe her? Check her phone. The app will be there too. All eyes turned to Vanessa, who clutched her bouquet tighter. I don't have to listen to this, she said. This jealous little girl shows up uninvited to ruin our special day with some made-up stories, and everyone's just going to believe her. Then show him your phone, Jasmine challenged. Vanessa laughed, but it sounded hollow. I'm not giving my personal phone to a child. Not to me, Jasmine said. To Dad. If you've got nothing to hide, what's the problem? The silence that followed was deafening. Robert looked between his daughter and his bride, clearly torn. Vanessa, he said quietly, maybe we should just check to clear this up. Are you serious? Vanessa's voice rose. You're taking her side? I'm not taking sides. I just want to know the truth. Vanessa's face darkened. The truth is that your daughter hates me. She always has. And now she's made up this whole story to stop our wedding. She turned to the guests. I'm sorry you all had to witness this disturbing behavior. Then, clutching her dress, she started walking back down the aisle toward the exit. Where are you going? Robert called after her. Away from here. Away from this circus. She paused at the door. Call me when you've got your family under control. As Vanessa pushed through the doors, Jasmine looked at her father. If she's innocent, why is she running? Vanessa's exit left the church in chaos. Guests stood from their seats, murmuring in confusion. Some followed Vanessa outside, while others crowded around Robert and Jasmine, asking questions all at once. Everyone please, the minister called out, raising his hands for quiet. Let's all remain calm. But calm was the last thing on anyone's mind. Vanessa's brother pushed through the crowd, his face red with anger. He grabbed Jasmine's arm hard enough to make her wince. Look what you've done, he hissed. You happy now? You ruined everything. Let go of her, Robert said, his voice sharper than Jasmine had heard in years. Your kid comes in here throwing wild accusations at my sister, and you're defending her. Vanessa's brother tightened his grip. You need to control your daughter. Jasmine tried to pull away, but his fingers dug deeper into her skin. You're hurting me. That's when Aunt Yvette stepped in, phone already in hand. Take your hands off that child right now, or I'm calling 911. Go ahead, he sneered. Call them. Let them sort out which one of these two is really causing trouble. Aunt Yvette didn't hesitate. She pressed the numbers and put the phone to her ear. We need police at First Baptist Church on Central Avenue, she said clearly. There's a domestic situation escalating, and a minor is being physically restrained against her will. Those words seemed to cut through the chaos. People backed away slightly, no one wanting to be part of a domestic situation when police arrived. Vanessa's brother finally let go of Jasmine's arm, leaving angry red marks on her dark skin. This isn't over, he warned before storming out after his sister. The wedding planner was fluttering around, trying to direct guests to the reception hall. Perhaps we could all move to have some refreshments while we sort this out. But no one was thinking about cake and champagne now. Robert knelt beside Jasmine, gently examining her arm. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? I'm fine, she said, surprised by the concern in his voice. When was the last time he had looked at her like that, like she mattered? We need to talk, he said quietly. About these messages, about the break-in, everything. Before Jasmine could respond, the church doors banged open again. Vanessa stormed back in, this time with two burly men in dark suits, hotel security from across the street, based on their badges. There she is, Vanessa pointed at Jasmine. That's the girl who crashed our wedding and assaulted me. What? Jasmine and Robert said in unison. The security guards moved forward. Miss, we need you to come with us. Aunt Yvette stepped between them and Jasmine. She hasn't assaulted anyone. In fact, she's the one who was just grabbed and bruised by that woman's brother. She shoved me when I tried to leave, Vanessa insisted, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I have witnesses. From the back of the church, someone called out, That's not true. The girl never touched her. Heads turned to see the church's elderly organist standing from her bench. I've been watching everything from up here. That young lady stayed right where she was. She never laid a hand on anyone. Others began to speak up too. The wedding photographer, still recording everything, shook his head. I've got it all on video. The bride left on her own. No one touched her. Vanessa's face contorted with rage. You're all taking her side? After she destroyed my wedding day. One of the security guards looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, if there's video evidence. Fine, Vanessa snapped. If you won't help me, I'll call the real police myself. She pulled out her phone and began dialing. Robert stepped forward. Vanessa, think about what you're doing. She ignored him, speaking into the phone. Yes, I need to report a disturbance. I'm being harassed at my own wedding by my fiance's daughter. No one noticed at first when the church doors opened again. It wasn't until the uniformed officers walked down the aisle that the crowd parted. Someone called about a domestic disturbance. The first officer asked, looking around at the strange scene, a bride with the phone to her ear, a groom in the middle of the aisle, and a teenage girl with fresh bruises forming on her arm. Wantivette stepped forward. That would be me, officer. And I think you've arrived just in time. The two police officers looked around the church, taking in the unusual scene. A bride in a white dress still holding a phone to her ear. A groom standing in the middle of the aisle, and a teenage girl with red marks on her arm. Officer Chen, this is Officer Rivera, the first officer said. We received a call about a domestic disturbance. Vanessa quickly ended her own call and stepped forward. Yes, officers, I'm the bride. This girl, she pointed at Jasmine, crashed our wedding with wild accusations and caused a scene. She's lying, Jasmine said. Her voice was quiet but clear. I came here because my mom's been getting threats. Our house was broken into last night. The officers exchanged glances. What had seemed like a wedding disaster was turning into something more serious. Is there somewhere we can talk privately? Officer Rivera asked. The church pastor offered his office, and soon the main players were gathered in the small room. Robert, Jasmine, Vanessa, Wantivette, and the two officers. The wedding guests remained in the sanctuary, no one willing to leave, and missed the drama's conclusion. Let's start from the beginning, Officer Chen said, notepad ready. Jasmine explained everything. The threatening messages, the break-in, the tracking app, how the threats always coincided with moments when her dad seemed to be reconnecting with his old family. Robert sat with his head in his hands. Wedding day turned nightmare. This is ridiculous, Vanessa insisted. She's making it all up for attention. Tell them, Robert. But Robert didn't back her up this time. I want to see those messages, he said instead. Jasmine handed him her phone, and Robert scrolled through the screenshots, his face growing darker with each swipe. Why didn't your mother report these? Officer Rivera asked. She did, once, Jasmine explained. But without proof of who sent them, there wasn't much the police could do. The accounts were all fake, made with temporary emails. And you believe Ms. Taylor sent these? Officer Chen asked, glancing at Vanessa. I know she did, Jasmine said firmly. Check her phone. The tracking app will be there. Vanessa clutched her purse tighter. This is harassment. I don't have to show you my personal property without a warrant. That's true, Officer Rivera said. But your refusal will be noted in our report. Report? Vanessa's voice rose an octave. What report? I'm the victim here. Officer Chen turned to Jasmine. You mentioned a break-in at your home last night. Was this reported? Yes, my mom called it in this morning. An officer named Jackson came by. Officer Rivera stepped into the hallway to radio in, confirming that there was indeed a break-in report filed that morning. When he returned, his demeanor had changed slightly. We'd like all parties to come down to the station to give formal statements, he said. This is no longer just about a wedding disruption. I'm not going anywhere, Vanessa insisted. We have a reception scheduled. Guests waiting. Ma'am, we're investigating potential stalking and a home invasion, Officer Chen explained patiently. That takes priority over cake and dancing. The pastor, who had been quietly observing, cleared his throat. Perhaps the reception could be postponed? Under the circumstances. Robert finally looked up. There isn't going to be a reception. What? Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. I need to know the truth, Vanessa. Did you send those messages? Did you break into my ex-wife's house? How can you even ask me that? Tears filled Vanessa's eyes. After everything we've been through. Just answer the question, Robert said, his voice tired but firm. Instead of answering, Vanessa turned to the officers. I want her arrested for defamation, for ruining my wedding, for turning my fiancé against me. Officer Rivera shook his head. That's not how it works, ma'am. Then I want my lawyer, Vanessa said, crossing her arms. I'm not saying another word without legal representation. The room fell silent. Even the most innocent request for a lawyer felt like an admission of guilt. Jasmine looked at her father, searching his face. For the first time in 3 years, he met her eyes without looking away. In that moment, something passed between them, a spark of the connection they once had. I believe you, he said quietly. I should have listened sooner. 6 months had passed since the wedding that never was. Autumn leaves crunched under Jasmine's feet as she walked up to the small brick building. The sign outside read Family First Counseling Center. Her stomach twisted with nerves, same as it did every Thursday afternoon. Inside, her dad was already waiting in the lobby, 2 paper cups of hot chocolate in his hands. It had become their little ritual before these sessions, hot chocolate and 5 minutes of small talk before the hard stuff began. Hey, he said, handing her a cup. How was school? Fine, Jasmine answered. Then, remembering what their counselor had told her about one-word answers, she added, got an A on my history project. Robert smiled, pride replacing the usual guilt in his eyes. That's great. The one about the civil rights movement? She nodded, surprised he'd remembered. These moments still felt strange. Her dad actually listening, actually caring about the details of her life. Their counselor, Dr. Powell, opened her office door. Ready when you are. Inside, they took their usual seats. After weeks of individual sessions, they'd graduated to joint counseling 2 months ago. It wasn't easy, but it was something. So, Dr. Powell began, how has this week been for both of you? Robert spoke first. Dean had his basketball tournament this weekend. We were all there, me, Jasmine, their mom. First time we've all been at something together since. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The investigation after the wedding had revealed more than anyone expected. The threatening messages had indeed come from Vanessa, sent through an app that was supposed to hide her identity. The break-in at their house had been her desperate attempt to delete evidence from their home computer. What no one had anticipated was how deep Vanessa's obsession went. Police found a journal where she documented Robert's ex-wife's daily routines for months. She'd even collected information about Dean's school and Jasmine's friends. Vanessa now faced stalking charges and had a restraining order against her. She'd moved to another state to live with relatives while awaiting trial. How does it feel, being around your mother again? Dr. Powell asked Robert. He sighed. Complicated. There's a lot of water under that bridge. But we're trying to be civil for the kids. It's not about us anymore. Jasmine picked at a loose thread on her jeans. That was something she was still getting used to, her parents talking about her and Dion like they mattered again. Jasmine? Dr. Powell turned to her. Any thoughts? It was weird at first, all of us together, she admitted. But kind of nice too. Dion was happy. What she didn't say was how she'd caught her mom and dad laughing together over something Dion had done on the court. It was a small moment, nothing earth-shattering, but it had given her a strange feeling, not hope exactly, but something close to it. I've been thinking a lot about trust, Robert said suddenly, about how easily it breaks and how hard it is to rebuild. Dr. Powell nodded encouragingly. Go on. I let my family down. I won't make excuses for that, but I'm grateful that Jasmine had the courage to speak up that day, even when I wasn't listening. He looked at his daughter, eyes shining. You saved us from something worse. You were braver than I've ever been. Jasmine blinked back unexpected tears. For 3 years, she told herself she hated her dad, that he didn't matter to her anymore. But sitting here now, she knew that wasn't true. You don't hate people who don't matter. I'm not going to let you down again, Robert promised. Any of you. Don't make promises you can't keep, Jasmine said, but there was no bite to her words. Fair enough. Then how about this? I promise to try. Every day. Even on the days when it's hard. Dr. Powell smiled. That sounds like a promise worth making. Outside after the session, they walked to their cars in comfortable silence. Before they parted, Robert hesitated. "Your mom mentioned Thanksgiving is at your house this year," he said. "Do you think, would it be okay if I dropped by? Just for a little while?" A year ago, Jasmine would have said no without thinking. 6 months ago, she would have made him beg. Today, she just nodded. "Yeah, Dion would like that." Then, after a moment, "I would too." It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a start.